Sometimes life throws you curveballs you never see coming. When I inherited my dear Aunt Martha's home last spring, I thought I was getting a blessing, a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and friendly faces. What I didn't expect was to become the target of the neighborhood's self-appointed ruler. Let me tell you about Margaret. Though everyone called her by a different name behind her back, she was the HOA president, and from day one, she made it clear that she ran things with an iron fist. I'll never forget our first meeting. I was unloading boxes when she marched up my driveway, clipboard in hand, looking like she was on a mission. "Excuse me," she announced, not even introducing herself, "but your mailbox doesn't meet our community standards. You have 48 hours to replace it, or you'll face a fine." I looked at the mailbox, the same one Aunt Martha had for 20 years. "I'm sorry, what's wrong with it exactly?" "The color's off-white, not pure white. And it's 3 inches too tall according to our guidelines." She thrust a citation at me. "Welcome to Willowbrook Estates. We maintain standards here." That was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, the citations piled up. My grass was allegedly too long. I measured it myself, and it was perfectly within limits. She claimed my garden hose was improperly stored when it was neatly coiled behind my garage. She even tried to fine me for having a bird feeder, saying it encouraged unwanted wildlife. But it wasn't just me. I started talking to my neighbors, and the stories broke my heart. There was Mr. Rodriguez, an 82-year-old veteran who'd been threatened with a lien because his fence was painted eggshell instead of ivory. Mrs. Chen received a citation because her roses were supposedly the wrong shade of pink. Young families were afraid to let their children play in their own yards because Margaret would storm over and lecture them about noise violations. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. I was having dinner with my sister and her kids when Margaret started pounding on my door. "Your guests parked incorrectly?" she shouted through the door. "Their cars are 6 inches over the designated visitor area. I'm calling the tow truck right now." My 8-year-old nephew looked terrified. My sister was furious. "Who is this woman?" she whispered. That night I made a decision. I started reaching out to other neighbors, and together we decided to fight back. We documented everything, every unfair citation, every threatening note, every instance of harassment. We requested a formal hearing with the HOA board, hoping for justice. But Margaret had surrounded herself with people who were either too intimidated to oppose her or too invested in the power structure she'd created. Then something unexpected happened that changed everything. It was a hot Thursday evening in July when Margaret's world began to unravel, though none of us knew it at the time. The monthly HOA meeting was unusually crowded. Word had spread about our formal complaints, and neighbors who'd suffered in silence for years finally showed up. The tension in the community center was thick enough to cut with a knife. Margaret sat at the head table like she was presiding over a royal court. When Mr. Rodriguez stood up to speak about the harassment he'd endured, she cut him off mid-sentence. "Double quotes, sir. You clearly don't understand the bylaws," she snapped. Maybe if you learned to read English properly, you wouldn't be so confused. The room went silent. Mr. Rodriguez, who'd served 2 tours in Vietnam and worked as an engineer for 30 years, just stared at her in disbelief. "I have a master's degree," he said quietly, "and I've been reading these bylaws very carefully. What you're doing isn't legal." Margaret's face turned red. "Don't you dare question my authority. I know more about property law than any of you. You people are all the same. You move into a nice neighborhood and then want to turn it into some kind of circus." That's when Mrs. Chen stood up, phone in hand. "I've been recording this entire meeting," she announced, "and I think people need to see what's really happening here." Margaret lunged toward her. "You can't record without permission. That's illegal." "Actually," said Mr. Rodriguez calmly, "HOA meetings are required to be open to members, and recording is allowed under state law." What happened next was like watching a volcano erupt. Margaret went into a complete meltdown, screaming about ungrateful residents and people who don't belong here. She used words I won't repeat, made statements that were clearly discriminatory, and completely lost control. Mrs. Chen uploaded the video that same night. By morning, it had a few hundred views. By the end of the week, it had gone viral with over 2 million views and thousands of comments from people sharing their own HOA horror stories. That's when the phone call came that would change everything. "Is this Sarah from Willowbrook Estates?" the voice asked. "This is a producer from Judge Judy's show. We saw the video. We'd like to invite you and Margaret to appear on the show to resolve this dispute." My heart nearly stopped. Judge Judy, the no-nonsense judge who'd been delivering justice on TV for decades. If anyone could put Margaret in her place, it would be her. When Margaret got the same call, her reaction was exactly what you'd expect. "This is perfect." She told everyone who would listen, "I'll show that TV judge how a real professional handles property disputes. She has no idea who she's dealing with." Oh, Margaret, if only you knew what was coming. The studio in Los Angeles felt like stepping into another world. As someone who'd watched Judge Judy for years, being there in person was surreal. But I wasn't there for the celebrity experience, was there for justice. Margaret arrived like she was attending a movie premiere. Designer suit, professional hair and makeup, carrying a leather binder thick as a phone book. She was practically glowing with confidence. "I hope you're ready to learn something today," she announced to the waiting area, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm about to show America how real professionals handle community management." When we were called into the courtroom, my nerves were on fire. But Margaret, she strutted in like she owned the place. Judge Judy was reviewing our case file as we took our positions. The silence stretched on, and I could feel the weight of the cameras. Finally, she looked up. "So," Judge Judy began, her voice calm but commanding, "we have a homeowners association president who apparently believes she's judge, jury, and executioner in her neighborhood." Margaret couldn't help herself. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I don't think you understand the complexities of modern community management. These people, excuse me?" Judge Judy's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Did I ask you a question?" Margaret blinked. "Well, no, but then close your mouth until I do." The audience chuckled. "Ma'am, you may be used to running your little neighborhood kingdom, but in this courtroom, there's only one judge. And you're looking at her?" I watched Margaret's face cycle through emotions, surprise, indignation, and then that familiar anger that had terrorized our neighborhood for years. "With all due respect." "Judge," Margaret said, her voice dripping with condescension, "I've been managing communities for over a decade. I know property law. I'm not sure you have the background to understand these complex issues." The courtroom fell dead silent. I couldn't believe she'd just questioned Judge Judy's qualifications. On her own show, Judge Judy slowly removed her glasses and set them down. When she looked back up, there was something dangerous in her eyes. "Did you just tell me I don't have the background to understand property law?" "I'm just saying," Margaret continued, apparently unable to read the room, "that community management requires specialized knowledge that, frankly, television judges might not possess." That was the moment Margaret sealed her fate. Specialized knowledge, Judge Judy repeated slowly. Television judges. She leaned back in her chair. Ma'am, I've been practicing law since before you were born. I've handled more property disputes, neighbor conflicts, and community issues than you've had hot dinners. And right now, you're about to get an education. The audience was completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Judge Judy opened her file. Let's talk about your qualifications, shall we? Because while you've been busy terrorizing your neighbors and acting like you're above the law, I did a little digging. Margaret's confidence flickered for the first time. I don't know what you mean. Oh, I think you do. Judge Judy pulled out a document. Let's start with your previous neighborhood, Oakwood Hills. Ring any bell? The same place where you were removed as HOA president for harassment and had multiple complaints filed against you? The color drained from Margaret's face. That's not relevant to this case. It's absolutely relevant. It shows a pattern of behavior, but we're just getting started. Judge Judy flipped through more papers. Then there's the matter of the fines you've been collecting. According to your own HOA's financial records, which I subpoenaed, you've collected over $50,000 in fines in the past 2 years. That's more than the previous 5 years combined. Where exactly is that money going? Margaret was now visibly shaking. Everything I do is legal and documented, is it? Because I also found some interesting discrepancies in your background. Care to explain the fraud charges from 2008? The audience gasped. I felt my jaw drop. Fraud charges. That was dismissed. Margaret protested. The charges were reduced to a misdemeanor, and you received community service. But you failed to disclose this when you ran for HOA president, didn't you? In fact, according to your community's bylaws, anyone with a criminal record is ineligible to serve on the board. Margaret tried to interrupt. But Judge Judy was on a roll. And let's not forget the restraining order filed against you by your former business partner, or the multiple complaints with the Better Business Bureau. Should I continue? Margaret was now crying, actual tears streaming down her face. This isn't fair. You're attacking me. I'm exposing the truth. You've spent years bullying your neighbors, hiding behind fake authority, and making people's lives miserable. Well, congratulations. Now the whole world knows exactly who you really are. Judge Judy turned to address me and the camera. The HOA fines imposed by this woman are hereby invalidated. Her position as president should be reviewed immediately. And I'm recommending that all residents affected by her harassment seek restitution for the emotional distress she's caused. The gavel came down with a resounding crack. Case dismissed. As we left the courtroom, Margaret was still sobbing. The woman who had terrorized an entire neighborhood for years was now reduced to tears on national television. But that was just the beginning of her downfall. When the episode aired 3 months later, it became one of the most watched Judge Judy episodes of the year. The internet exploded with memes, reaction videos, and stories from people sharing their own encounters with power-hungry HOA officials. Back in Willowbrook Estates, the change was immediate. Within a week of the episode airing, Margaret resigned from the HOA board. Her allies quickly distanced themselves, and several neighbors she'd previously fined successfully challenged their citations. The neighborhood transformed. Children played in yards again. People planted the flowers they actually wanted. Block parties returned. It was like emerging from a dark cloud that had hung over us for years. As for Margaret, she became a recluse. Her once pristine house, which she'd used as the gold standard for neighborhood compliance, began to show signs of neglect. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Sometimes I'll drive past her house and remember the woman who once made all our lives miserable. I don't feel joy in her downfall, but I do feel satisfaction knowing that justice was served. Because sometimes, bullies need to learn that their actions have consequences. And sometimes, those consequences come with a gavel and a television audience of millions. Judge Judy was right that day. Margaret got an education she'd never forget. And so did the rest of us about standing up to people who abuse their power. The best part? Our new HOA president is Mr. Rodriguez, the same man Margaret had insulted and tried to silence. Under his leadership, our community has become exactly what a neighborhood should be. A place where people look out for each other instead of tearing each other down. Sometimes karma comes in the form of a stern judge with a sharp tongue and an even sharper sense of justice. And sometimes, that's exactly what the world needs.